Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. And do you remember when Donald Trump said he was downgrading the UK trade talks to second tier so he could focus on nations like South Korea? It was less than 2 weeks ago, yet today he still doesn't have an agreement with South Korea, but has just announced a deal with the UK. So what happened to downgrading those talks then? Is Trump's art of the deal just the art of the bluff? Because I have to say, on the evidence so far, it's not really working. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So, yes, what happened to us being downgraded to 2-tier then? Trumpy boy, what happened? What happened with that? There he was, telling everyone that the UK was being difficult over chicken. So he was putting talks on the back burner to focus on South Korea. This was less than 2 weeks ago. This man backs down so often he must be on his arse by now. So anyway, Trump announced to Truth Social yesterday that he was ready to go public with a deal with a big, highly respected country. His words. So immediately everyone's going, okay, well, this is obviously the UK because we're the only country that was in advanced talks with the US at the time of the tariffs. Despite Trump hyping the agreement, however, it's not really considered major by trade experts. I do have to point out, at the point at which this video comes out, Donald Trump will have made his announcement, and so presumably will Keir Starmer. However, he was so late turning up to his own meeting that I've had to record it before he said anything, which actually might be a blessing. But we know the broad strokes of it. And also it's important to distinguish as well between a trade deal and a trade agreement. A trade agreement is the big one. A trade deal is just something more limited. The terms trade deal and trade agreement are often used interchangeably by ignorant herberts like myself, but there is a distinction from a technical point of view. And Trump talked about a trade deal yesterday, not an agreement. Now, details are, of course, again, as I say, still sketchy. They'll still be sketchy after Trump's finished talking. I mean, everything's sketchy after Trump's finished talking. But it seems, in terms of what's been reported ahead of it, to be a tariff reduction deal, essentially. And it also sounds more like a framework rather than something that's ready to be signed. In fact, earlier today, Trump did go further. He then called it, he called it a full and comprehensive trade agreement. It's not. I wonder if he knows his line because he always bigs everything up, or he just doesn't know. And he's said, I want a comprehensive trade agreement. And his negotiators have come back and have you got me a comprehensive trade agreement? Yes. I really don't know. But it's a trade deal. He was right yesterday. As simple a deal as you can get. From what sounds of it, it sounds like, we're going to lower the cost of some American businesses in our market. They're going to do the same in their market. We wanted a deal for car, steel and possibly pharmaceuticals. So hopefully that's what's in it for us. America wanted something for their own cars and pharmaceuticals as well as big tech companies. Said a few weeks ago, Trump might be persuaded to have to get behind these trade talks to get a quick win after his Liberation Day fiasco. So when he announced he was downgrading the importance of the talks, it could only have been because either he had more advanced negotiations with other countries, which is what he was suggesting, even though that seemed unlikely, or he was bluffing. Well, now we know. He's clearly desperate for something to sell to the public. He's obviously not ready to announce. He said this is going to be the first of many deals. Well, he clearly doesn't have deals in the pipeline. Otherwise, he would have just focused on those. But anyway, doesn't require us to change any of our standards. Starmer was quite clear on that earlier today. It was a complete non-starter anyway. We're getting ready to align standards with the EU in some key areas in order to get the agri-food agreement. That was just not compatible with what Trump wanted on food and pharmaceuticals. And that is worth more to us than anything Trump was prepared to offer. In fact, the single best and quickest way to boost our trade, according to experts, is, do you know what? Align standards with the EU. The more standards we're prepared to align, the more it'll boost our economy. Really that simple. A tariff reduction deal with the US limits the amount of damage Trump's economic policies will cause. The Bank of England, the head of the Bank of England, Governor Andrew Bailey, he was talking earlier on because, of course, the Bank of England just announced another interest rate cut. Trump's really upset because his bank has not. And he was making the point that he obviously hadn't seen the details. He didn't know to what extent the tariffs were reduced, but he did make the point we are still going to suffer from the tariffs on other countries anyway, even if those tariffs on the UK are reduced to zero, which I don't think they are. It allows us to save jobs. That's the main benefit to us. Labour really wanted this deal in order to avoid job losses in the car industry as a result of Trump's 25% tariffs in particular. Quite interesting to compare this process so far with when Boris Johnson dealt with the Australia trade talks. Do you remember that? After conceding a lot of ground, Johnson was publicising the deal. I've got this deal, it's marvellous. When the Australian government, who were much brighter than he was, spotted an opportunity. They went, oh, we've got him now. He's publicised it to his public before we firmly agreed on it. Right then. So then the Australian government said to Boris Johnson, oh, actually, we're not so keen on it now. We might actually just drop the whole thing. Johnson panicked and then gave even more concessions. And that's why his own Environment Secretary, once he'd stepped down from the role, attacked the deal in Parliament. Compare that with now. Trump tried the same trick. Knowing the UK government wanted the deal, and we did. We wanted this deal, and we wanted it before the EU summit later this month. And also, of course, before car manufacturers start making redundancies. So Trump tried to say, oh, I'm not interested. I'm going to downgrade it in order for us to agree to those lower standards. After all, it worked for Australia. Why not the mighty America? Different government, mate. The current one wasn't going to get positive headlines in the Daily Express anyway, which is all Boris Johnson wanted. You know, we need the EU trade deal more. So Trump's bluff didn't work. Here we are. And being clear, I do think this announcement has come because Trump needs something to show for his trade policy. If he hadn't done that old tariff nonsense, I don't think we'd have been announcing this trade deal today. It's a month since his Liberation Day. So far, all anyone has seen of Trump is him backing down multiple times. And in reality, this is another climb down, but he can sell it as being because of his tariffs, even though these talks predate the tariffs. But most Americans are unlikely to know that. I mean, it's trade talks, boring, right? All they will know is that Trump promised deals after his tariffs. He can now give them a deal, and Americans will go, oh, great, we've got 60 more days for more deals, brilliant. And that's all they'll see. They will see that the UK has agreed to reduce some tariffs to American exports, job done. And in return, Labour can say the same thing, as well as emphasise the jobs the deal will protect. That being said, one bone of contention, of course, is that it could look like we are making concessions in response to Trump's extortion tactics, because that's how he'll be selling it in America. His real reason for tariffs, remember, is tax raising and encouraging more production in America. But he has suggested it works as leverage in trade talks with other countries. And people in Britain obviously are not going to like the idea of looking like we've backed down to extortion. But at the end of the day, although I do not know the details at this point, and again, I suspect I won't at any point today, I mean, this sounds very like the deal Labour were pushing for before the tariffs. And we were certainly negotiating them before the tariffs. Labour just need to keep emphasising the protection of British jobs without selling out our standards, as Starmer was doing earlier today, and it will be fine. It's not like, I don't think the Tory press are going to attack any sort of trade deal with the US, although I will have to wait for tomorrow's papers to really know. It's also another deal which is causing the Tories some distress. The front bench are trying to avoid saying very much at all, partly because they can't really attack a deal with America, and partly because they can't give Labour any credit. They can try attacking the limited scope of the deal, I suppose, but nobody wants the poison chicken in the UK, and Labour can always fire back and say, well, to the Tories, you had years to get a trade deal, you drew a blank. But it hasn't stopped some Conservative MPs, just as with the India deal, putting party politics aside and going, yeah, we approve of this, and being more than happy to say that Labour have done well getting the UK to the front of the queue with Trump. But the bottom line is that 2 trade deals have now been concluded, and the government will be announcing more at the UK-EU summit later this month. At this rate, we're going to have had more trade deals than the Tories had leaders last Parliament. And all without experts saying that they're hopelessly in favour of the other side. But this is the difference. The Tories can exist on positive headlines, so that's all they chase. They only need to chase that. The country could go to hell in a handbasket. Doesn't matter. As long as the headlines are positive, they're happy. Labour never get the positive headlines, so they actually need to improve things in a very obvious way. They need results. That being said, the process is not going to go without a hitch. See, just before recording, I saw a little report. Now, just to be clear, as I'm talking about this, Keir Starmer's not held the press conference. but there was a report that journalists were given the wrong location for the press conference. So although I don't know how it's going to go, I'm going to guess there won't be much press at the press conference, because it's not even like the two locations were close to one another. So another magnificent triumph for Labour's comms team. Sort it out. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.